earth, so that they may spread throughout the earth, bear fruit, and become many on the earth. So Noah with his wife and his children with their spouses and every kind of bird, animal, and crawling thing that moves on the ground left the ark, one family at a time. Noah built an altar to the Holy One, and choosing from every clean animal and every clean bird, offered burnt offerings on it. The giver of life smelled the sweet fragrance and said, "Never again will I curse the earth because of humankind, since the evil their hearts contrive begins from infancy. Never again will I strike down every living thing as I have done. So long as the earth lasts, sowing and reaping, cold and heat, winter and summer, day and night will never cease." Holy wisdom, holy words, thanks be to God.
interested in the Texas legislature. 2 o'clock in the morning. It'd be easier if Republicans would just say who we're supposed to hate that year. I'm sorry, was that partisan? When the Republicans stop attacking innocent people, they won't show up in my sermons anymore. You can't be a good friend of the oppressed and be camouflage for the oppressor. Every year, hate legislation takes place in our state capitol. Tomorrow it will be LGBTQ. It could be Muslim the next day. Hateful legislation, supposedly to protect us from Sharia law. And it's funny. It's funny in one sense, but there are people being crushed by the clown car. Right? It would be a joke if people weren't being hurt by it. And so, whoever But what you realize is because these are ancient stories, what the rabbis were doing was changing the bad story people were living by into a good story. And so when you're looking at the story, the question is, what is different about the Jewish version or the Christian version of these ancient stories? And what's different about this story, what's added to the story, is the rainbow. I so cleverly titled the sermon, Rainbow. Often we think of the rainbow as something unrealistic, right? It's a symbol of fantastical thinking and stuff. And I was thinking of Somewhere Over the Rainbow, the song where it goes, someday I'll wish upon a star and wake up where the clouds are far behind me, where troubles melt like lemon drops, way above the chimney tops. That's where you'll find me. The only problem is we live under the rainbow. Right? And there's sometimes when it's all tornadoes and flying monkeys. The Lollipop Guild misses its entrance. And so we need an idea of peace and beauty and goodness that works here in the confusion of where we live. And that's what scriptural stories do magnificently. Whoever came up with the rainbow story was trying to teach people that God doesn't punish. How many evangelists have you heard that taught that a hurricane happened because gay people lived there, or liberals? You guys have a lot of power. That's pretty impressive. Pretty impressive. The point of the story is God didn't throw a tantrum. God has never been like that. God doesn't use weather to punish people. The sin that's being addressed, it's right here in the story, is not sexual morals. It's violence. It's domination. It's the people that beat up on gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender people. Immigrants, Muslims, whoever's vulnerable. And I feel it's important to name the party until somebody renounces what's happening. They can still be conservative, can still be Republican, but you have to say this is wrong. Right? You have to say it's wrong to single out people and persecute them. Now the problem faced by the Republican Party is that their program is to empty the public coffers into private pockets. And that's a hard thing to run on. We want to take away your libraries and your public lands and cash in on it. That's not probably going to be very successful politically. So what they do is they find one scapegoat after another. And say, you should be afraid of that person. You should be afraid of that person. So they have you afraid of the modern day Anne Frank, right? The immigrant people. They have you afraid of the village people. So what the story tells us is God is not like that. It opens that idea that God reigns on the just and the unjust. God's light shines on the just and the unjust. We think we want a dictator God. We think we want somebody who controls everything. Because it feels safe to think there's somebody at the steering wheel. But what our story is telling us is compost happens. I'm being classy here. Things happen and it's not your fault. And when those things happen, only compassion gets us out of it. If we return hate for hate, we get stuck in the trap, the same trap. So this talks about a covenant. And if you don't think that religion is universal, look at this story. It's a story of a very early story of a covenant with all being. Not just all people, but all life. As a vegetarian animal person, I really love that part, that they didn't eat meat before this. Of course, they eat meat after that. But the point is, I think, the stories of Genesis are showing how we've fallen from nature. And it just traces it along the way. That point at which we lose sensitivity to the pain we inflict on animals is a very important ethical moment. Because if we can't feel the pain we're causing animals, there's no rational reason to feel that for the stranger, for the person who's different than us. So that's not saying don't eat meat. If you're planning on going to sirloin steak after this, it's not about that. It's saying the sensitivity, feeling the pain. Because if not, we become a reflection of that which we abhor. This is again Sir Steve, Saint Steve. How can we expect the world to change if we are unwilling to change ourselves? We hate the haters, judge the judgers, and refuse to forgive the supposedly unforgivable. We are hypocrites, most of us, comfortable condemning others for the same things we do. Like sheep we follow, like wolves we attack. Like fools we listen to the loudest voices even when they scream nothing but hate. We are lost in our desire to be like everyone else and paralyzed in our fear to be ourselves. We are desperate to feel safe amidst our cries for retaliation and more wars. Where is the common sense? If we want to end war, then be peaceful. If we want to know love, then stop hating. If we want to find happiness, then let go of negativity and befriend gratitude. Real change isn't born from making the same choices over and over. We need to hear that, right? If we keep doing the same stuff, we'll get the same results. Real change isn't born from making the same choices over and over, especially choices muddied with insecurity and fear. We can't wrest ourselves away from darkness by turning out our light. Everything just gets darker then. Let's worry less about changing the world and more about changing ourselves. That we can do, each one of us, with more commitment and work, and a single candle does wonders in even the darkest nights. Now, I think the way to unpack this parable is to realize that it's not really about rainbows. The rainbow is a symbol of all beauty. And it's a reminder that in the midst of the storm, in the midst of bitterness and ugliness and violence, when we turn our souls to something beautiful, there's a healing that takes place. There's a memory that's restored of our connection to the earth and to each other. And that sense of interconnectedness is where our hearts are meant to live. Solzhenitsyn, when he won the Nobel Peace Prize, he gave a speech where he talked about literature and how literature is the worst enemy of tyrants. Because anything that opens up your heart makes it really hard for a demagogue to manipulate you. The worst thing about a demagogue is you can either close your heart in support or in resistance. Either way, the demagogue wins. As soon as we become reactive, we fall into the same trance. Solzhenitsyn quoted Dostoevsky, and you have to remember those names. This incredible line, "Beauty will save the world." And I don't think it's being naive. Whether or not it saves the world, it saves our heart. Think about Van Gogh with all of the turbulence of his life, being committed for insanity much of his life. And yet he saw a beauty in things that we would see as ordinary. A gray cloud, to his eyes, would be full of explosive colors, and he would paint that. The point is for us to see the world that way. Or you think of Beethoven, who lost his hearing and yet could still produce music. Because what the rainbow really is the visible expression of an invisible harmony. Music expresses it, beauty, rainbows. But what a gift it is to not have to see the expression, but to trust that you're living in that beauty, that harmony. A rainbow is such a good example of that because it's not really external and it's not really internal. It's just a weird something. It's not an object outside of you. But another human being standing next to you will see it as well. It'll actually be a different rainbow for their eye. But the point is, religion is about that strange mystery between the inside and the outside. To say God exists isn't quite true. To say God doesn't exist isn't quite true. There's something mysterious between ourselves, each other, even within ourselves. So the rainbow represents something we can't reach. What we have to do is realize we are shining out of that invisible harmony. And when we put our hearts at peace, we are rooted into our source. And then to realize every other being, every animal, every tree, every insect is like a rainbow shining out of this invisible harmony. Then we realize it's within that harmony that we live and breathe and have our being. Live, move, have our being. We can't get over the rainbow. We can't get to the rainbow even. We live in a world with a lot of pain, and there are times when you're just stuck in the tornado. But even in that situation, there can be beauty. There is beauty when we silence our heart, tune our heart to that which is around us. I don't know about you, but I'm not an activist because I think we're necessarily going to win on any of the causes. Sometimes we do, and that's incredible. What an incredible moment when that happens. But just being in the company of other lovers of humankind and of nature. What a life that is. I would never trade it for success. That would be insane. Would you rather spend an evening with Martin Luther King, the worst night of his life, after the worst defeat, or be with LBJ and the other white people that took credit for the civil rights movement? Would you rather smell the cigar smoke of success or be in the company of greatness? In the pain, in the storm, there is always beauty. Sometimes we can see it, sometimes we can't. One more quote from our friend Steve Stabile, who says, "Let them judge you. Let them misunderstand you. Let them gossip about you. Their opinions are not your problem. You stay kind, committed to love, and free in your authenticity, no matter what they say or do. Don't you dare doubt your worth or the beauty of your truth. Just keep on shining like you do." And that truth, when we realize that we are shining out of that invisible harmony, which is the source of every being, we have a treasure we can carry our hearts, even under the rainbow, where we live our real lives. I invite you now to your own reflection on these words.